What up, fam? On another beautiful walk. I'm out a little bit earlier when I used to go out before the oldest got out of school for the school year. Plus, got my joy on. Black boy joy out here, black man joy, because I'm a man, boy. All right. Woo, I'm hyped up. I had a really wild day yesterday in a good way, and it's really helped to push some of my thoughts right now. There's a lot going on in my life, in the world, in y'all's lives. So check this. What does The Matrix, Bruce Lee's Game of Death, and affirmative action have in common? Ooh, do you know? About to find out. All right. So all of those two movies show us ways of understanding life. Affirmative action is a mechanism, a modality to help address some inequities in this game of life. So The Matrix showed us something very interesting. It showed us, let's call it the spectrum of awareness, the spectrum of knowledge. Or if you have a Christian background, such as myself, or you are a Christian, such as myself, maybe the tree of knowledge, because sometimes we think of a spectrum as linear, but really spectrums they're like spheres, and there's a lot more multitudinal dynamics to spectrums than we understand. But might help to think of this in a linear fashion, right? So there's the blue pill, there's the red pill. I always forget which pill was which, right? One of those pills was you just stayed in the matrix, completely unaware of what was going on, that the machines had taken over and all this stuff, right? And then the other pill was the other extreme. It was extreme awareness. But I don't know if y'all been paying attention. Life is not binary, y'all. We don't have yes and no. We also have maybe. We also have I'm not sure. There's degrees of maybe. If you play spades, you know this. I think I got 5 in a P, right? Sometimes that maybe comes out to be that one, okay? So there's a spectrum of awareness and knowledge. It's not just only stay in the system, and it's not only complete awareness. You can have different degrees of awareness. So what happens if you start gaining some awareness to the system without gaining awareness to yourself? If you ever read that stupid boy in South Carolina, Dylan Roof, who is a domestic terrorist, the one who killed 9 black people, including an elected official at a church, Christians should be absolutely outraged, but they weren't. Interesting thing was, one of the reasons I don't really go to church as much as I used to, still have my faith, was because the weekend after that domestic terrorist incident in South Carolina, it was Father's Day weekend. And I went to this amazingly diverse church. It did not hold up to that reputation of Sunday morning is the most segregated time in the U.S. Multinational, multi-ethnic, multiracial. It was multi-generational, different degrees of education. We had a bunch of PhDs in there. We had a bunch of people who had a high school education, okay? So it's Father's Day weekend, but also a few days ago, that crazy domestic terrorist incident in South Carolina happened. So I'm expecting a message. They didn't say one word about what happened to 9 black people who got murdered by a white domestic terrorist. Y'all talk about the young folks aren't racist. That boy was like 20 years old when he did that, all right? If you ever read his manifesto or any of these other manifestos that have come out from these white men who aren't lone wolves, they're actually just representations of white male rage. They're the embodiment of it. There's male rage, period. And then there's different degrees of male rage. And white male rage is up there, okay? His manifesto was he started having some awareness about the knowledge of the world. And when you have some awareness about racial equity dynamics, whether it's accurate or wrong, because a lot of his was very wrong, without having knowledge of yourself, then you become very skewed. He wasn't aware of his privilege in the situation. All he saw was division. All he saw was hate. All he saw was fear. This is what happens online when you see a bunch of these folks who are screaming that they're being discriminated against, and they're like very privileged white men, or even very privileged men of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, right? So the one thing that we learn from the Matrix is that spectrum of knowledge is not binary. There's choices in the middle. Bruce Lee's Game of Death, if you're a Kung Fu flick fan, especially from the 80s and the 90s, when it was so crazy. Game of Death, I mean, Bruce Lee was like no other, okay? He wasn't just a martial artist. He wasn't just one of the people who helped to expose the Western world to Kung Fu and martial arts, or Gung Fu with the G. Y'all don't know about that. I used to practice this. He was one of the first people to bring that over, but he also studied, right? So I used to be part of a martial arts school in pre-gentrified Silver Spring. Everybody in there was black or Puerto Rican, or one of the few Jewish dudes that was in there. Our Sifu was black, right? And so his Qigong was Sifu Dean Chin. It's one of the original first people outside of Hollywood to bring Gung Fu to the United States. And he was killed because he used to go to the hood and he would have teams of just black and Puerto Rican dudes. And he taught them all this stuff and they would just decimate these tournaments. But it wasn't just physical. It was also the art. We studied the philosophy. We studied the theory. Bruce Lee studied the theory. He wasn't just out there for the martial gains. All right, I'm gonna turn around right here. But through studying those martial gains and studying the philosophies, he created Jeet Kune Do. And one of Bruce Lee's famous quotes was, "Be the water. The water has no style. The water adapts to wherever the water is." That's been the Black American experience, okay? We have had to adapt. We are the water. We have no shape. We have no culture because y'all took it, so we had to rebuild a culture based on this new container that you put us in. The other thing that Bruce Lee was showing us in Game of Death was there was different levels of these styles when he was in that game at the end trying to get his way out. And he's a master, right? No one knows it better than him. I don't care what Chuck Norris says, man. So like, ain't no one know the game like Bruce Lee knew the game. So even though he is so highly skilled, he is at the peak of human physical condition, when he got to the top, there was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was actually studying under Bruce Lee, but he was an athlete. He's no expert martial artist, right? But because he was so privileged, height, right? And even though he was blind in that movie, he was using his other senses, right? Because when one sense is down, we pick up these strengths from other senses that people who are sighted or they have these other senses don't have, right? So that happened. Okay, so now he's fighting this dude. When he's fighting this dude, what's up, brother? How you doing? He's fighting this dude, and you always gotta acknowledge other black men. Boy, we out here, okay? Some of y'all new black folks. Y'all don't want to do this, man. The black head nod is universal, okay? There's a reason why we do that. I'm gonna work that into the rest of this. So when he's up there, even though he's this expert, he struggled trying to defeat this person because their privilege was so great. Even though he was so masterful, he was so good, all these things, just because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's character was so tall, he barely could beat him. He had to figure out a different way. He could not beat him physically. He had to combine his mind and his body. That's the art and the martial, okay? The martial and the art, not just the martial, okay? We get in this hyperbolic American society that we have created, this hyper individualistic, extreme version of capitalism. I ain't gonna say extreme version, just base 0.1 version of capitalism. Like, can we get to 2.0, 2.5, 3.0? Make this more equitable? But basically, that's the thing with Game of Death, right? You can't top that. All right. So privilege, right? So we got one. There is a spectrum of knowledge. It's not just binary. There's more variables in between. And when you gain more knowledge without gaining self-awareness, you actually become really dangerous, right? The other thing is, when someone has a high degree of privilege, it's hard to overcome them. Their privilege has such a presence that even if you are at the peak of human physical condition and you understand other things like philosophies about martial arts and all this other stuff, it's hard to overcome that obstacle of privilege that is placed in front of you. But you can do it. Okay, affirmative action. Affirmative action relies on the understanding of knowledge, that this society is inequitable, that the United States wasn't created to be this marvelous social experiment of diversity. It was created so white men, Anglo-Saxon white men from England who had enough money by marriage or by other ways could come here, they could have land, and they could have the same power as a king. They could be their own feudal lord. Think about a Jay-Z line. Anyway, they could be their own feudal lord. That's really what the U.S. was created to be. And when you understand that, and you understand that the engine, the economic engine behind that was built upon slaves, enslaved people, that's when you understand this game is rigged. And we don't have to play the game, but we all do to a certain degree. We can never fully escape the game. So affirmative action is saying we're starting from behind in this game, y'all. And we're not trying to play the game. We're just trying to enjoy our life. We want an equal shot to these things. And even though things became legal, y'all didn't do anything to change your mentality. Your privilege is still there. Some of y'all got a little bit of awareness, but you didn't get the understanding of yourselves, and you became dangerous. And it became dangerous for the people at the bottom. But the people at the bottom, we have no container. We don't have these confines that white supremacy in varying degrees below white supremacy have. We're out here. We're wild. We're free-ish. So what I want you to remember today, gain awareness about yourself. The specter of racism affects everyone. The spectrum of patriarchy affects everyone. I shouldn't even say specter because it's not a ghost, it's alive and well. So knowledge, expand your knowledge, but also expand your understanding of yourself and where you fit. Stop being scared of being uncomfortable. You got to get out that shell. You got to, oh, that bug almost flew my mouth again. Ah! All right. The other part is understand the game. Don't just understand some aspects of the game. Understand when you're fighting against privilege. Understand, does it really mean that you need to defeat it, or you just need to overcome it so you can keep on walking, right? And then the last part is, just because a certain movement doesn't directly benefit you, doesn't mean it's not good. Come on, man, that fly really trying to get me, man. You see that thing flying there? Will not fly in my mouth. Will not. Okay. Look, these flies are getting me. I'm gonna end this right now. It almost got me. It almost got me. All right, look, y'all get the point. Y'all get the point. Keep walking.